Before the ancestors and these esteemed nobles, I declare my sincere love for you. You are my heart's true desire.
The drums stopped. The courtyard, usually alive with laughter, footsteps, and the rustling of palace fabrics, fell into a terrifying silence. Everyone watched in disbelief as the crown prince of Aderin Kingdom walked calmly into the royal hall with the young palace maid by his side. His steps were steady, his robe gold-trimmed and majestic, yet his jaw locked with the stubbornness that had shaken the entire kingdom. The maid, small-statured, soft-spoken, with warm brown skin and bright eyes, trembled under the weight of hundreds of stares. Nobles, chiefs, elders, princesses, and carefully groomed maidens froze like carved statues. The queen was the first to rise. Her voice sliced through the air like a blade. "My son, tell me this is a joke." But the crown prince didn't flinch. He stepped forward, held the maid's hand for all to see, and said loudly, "Mother, father, this is the woman I choose. This is the woman I love. This is the only woman I will marry." Before we continue, if you believe our stories deserve to be heard, do me a quick favor. Hit the like button, subscribe, and share this video with someone who loves meaningful African tales. Let's keep our stories alive together. Gasps swept across the hall like a wild storm, sharp, fast, and uncontrollable. A jeweled cup dropped from a noblewoman's hand and shattered on the marble floor. One of the noble maidens burst into tears. A few chiefs exchanged quick glances, already calculating political consequences. The king's eyes darkened with disappointment. "You were born into royalty. You cannot marry a common maid." But the prince lifted his chin. "I will marry whoever my heart chooses." At that moment, chaos erupted. The maid was dragged back by angry noblewomen accusing her of bewitching the prince. Young maidens screamed. Palace guards tried to separate clashing groups. The queen shouted orders, trying to restore control. The king slammed his staff on the ground, but even that thunderous sound got swallowed by the uproar. Then, just as the prince rushed forward to shield the maid, the great ancestral gong boomed, echoing across the kingdom. A sound that only struck during war, or during a royal crisis that threatened the future of the throne. The entire palace froze again. The king looked at his son with fear and fury. The queen held her chest, breath uneven. The maid stopped crying, trembling harder. And with a voice filled with ancient warning, the chief priest stepped into the hall and said, "If the prince continues on this path, the throne itself may fall." The prince's eyes widened. Everyone waited. The maid stepped back. The queen's hand dropped from her mouth. And the chief priest raised a sealed scroll that would change everything. The scroll containing the ancient royal decree, one that had not been opened in over 100 years. The prince's heart pounded. The king stepped closer. The queen whispered a prayer. And the chief priest said, "The fate of the kingdom is written here, but I must warn you, the truth inside may destroy what you love most." He broke the seal. Just then, the torches in the hall flickered violently and went out, plunging the palace into darkness. A scream pierced the shadows. The prince grabbed the maid's hand. And before anyone could understand what was happening, she vanished. Her hand slipped from his. Her voice disappeared. Her presence dissolved like smoke, right in the middle of the palace hall. And with gasps rising again, the prince shouted into the darkness, "Where is she who took her?" But the hall answered him with only the fading echo of the ancient gong, leaving everyone frozen, confused, terrified, and wondering, had something darker than love been awakened? The torches sputtered back to life one by one, casting trembling glows across the palace hall. The air was thick with shock. People whispered, some prayed, and others stared as though the very walls had shifted. The crown prince stood frozen, his chest heaving, his eyes scanning every corner. The maid was gone. Not a trace of her dress. Not a sound of footsteps. Not even the faintest echo of her scream. Just nothing. The queen rushed toward her son. "We must leave this hall now. Something is wrong, terribly wrong." But the prince shook his head. "I am not leaving until she is found." The king barked an order at the guards. "Seal the gates. Search every corridor, every chamber, every corner of the palace." Dozens of armored guards sprinted out. The chief priest remained still, clutching the opened scroll. His eyes were unreadable. The decree foresaw a disruption when the prince chose love over tradition, but this disappearance was not written. The prince grabbed the scroll. "Then what is written?" The priest took a slow breath. "It warns that the heart of a future king must bring harmony or chaos to the kingdom, and when a royal rejects noble bloodlines, shadows of ancient unrest may return." The prince's jaw tightened. "You speak in riddles." The queen added softly, "My son, you know we only wanted the best for you. Marrying from a noble family strengthens alliances. It protects the throne." "But what of happiness, mother?" he fired back. "What of love?" She lowered her eyes. "Love grows, but kingdoms must stand." For a brief moment, silence settled again. The prince walked toward the empty space where the maid had last stood. His voice dropped, filled with pain. "She was right here. I was holding her hand. And now—" A guard ran into the hall, panting. "Your Majesty, we found something." Everyone followed him. At the palace courtyard, the ground was oddly disturbed. A small silver pendant, the maid's pendant, one she always wore, lay half buried in the dirt. The prince fell to his knees, picking it up with shaking hands. The queen gasped, "What does this mean?" The guard pointed at the ground. "We found footprints, Your Majesty, but—" The king frowned. "But what?" "Only one set of footprints, hers. They stop abruptly, like she was lifted away." The prince stood slowly, gripping the pendant. His voice was low, dangerous. "Someone took her, and they knew exactly how to do it without being seen." The chief priest whispered, "This is no ordinary act. It smells of ancient magic." The king stiffened. "That magic was banned generations ago." "Not everyone obeys history," the priest replied. Another guard rushed forward. "We also found this, Your Majesty." He held a shred of deep purple fabric, a color worn only by noble families during the marriage parade. The queen's eyes widened. "No, no noble family would dare." The prince cut her off. "Oh, they would, because every maiden here wanted to be the next queen." A murmur swept through the crowd. Rumors began forming instantly. A noble maiden jealous of the maid. A family trying to force tradition. A plot to scare the prince into abandoning his choice. Or something worse. The prince stormed toward the chambers of the noble maidens, pushing past guards. "Search everyone, every room, every corner." The king called after him. "My son, stop. We cannot accuse noble families without proof." But the prince didn't stop. He burst into the first chamber. Maidens screamed as they scrambled away. But he ignored them. He searched wardrobes, chests, drawers, nothing. Second chamber, nothing. Third, nothing. Finally, at the chamber of the most admired maiden, tall, elegant, daughter of a powerful nobleman, he paused at the doorway. She sat on her cushioned stool, brushing her long hair. She didn't look surprised to see him. "Your Highness," she said calmly, "I was expecting you." The prince frowned. "Where is she?" She lifted her eyes, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Who?" "You know who. Don't play games with me." She set her brush down and stood, her posture graceful yet cold. "Your Highness, I am a daughter of dignity. I don't involve myself with palace maids." The prince stepped closer. A piece of noble fabric was found where she vanished. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "There are many noble families. Why come to me first?" Because, he said quietly, you are the one who had the most to lose. She folded her arms. Or perhaps I am simply the easiest to blame. Before he could question her further, her father entered the room, tall, muscular, and dressed in ceremonial robes. Your Highness, the man said with a bow, though his eyes were sharp, you cannot barge into my daughter's chamber with accusations. I am searching for the woman I intend to marry, the prince snapped. Someone made her disappear. The nobleman's expression darkened. A prince marries royalty, not a servant girl. The prince stepped closer, refusing to back down. I will marry whoever I choose, and nothing will stop me. The nobleman clenched his jaw. You are endangering the future of Aderin kingdom. You endangered it, the prince shot back, the moment you decided you were above my decisions. The tension in the room felt sharp enough to cut through stone. The chief priest entered suddenly. Enough, the spirits are restless. This is not the time for conflict. The kingdom is walking a dangerous path. Everyone turned to him. His voice dropped into a grave whisper. I have interpreted the rest of the decree, and the truth is far more alarming than you think. He unrolled the scroll. The prince's heart pounded. The decree states, the priest said slowly, if the heir chooses a bride from lowly soil, the kingdom shall be tested by shadows buried long ago. The queen gasped. The king gripped his staff. The prince swallowed hard. And the priest continued, one of those shadows has already awakened. The room trembled. A cold wind swept through the open window. The torches flickered violently again. And the priest looked directly at the prince. Your future queen is in danger from forces older than this kingdom, forces that do not want this marriage to happen. The prince whispered, where is she? The priest closed the scroll. That, he said, is what we must uncover before it is too late. The royal council chamber, usually a place of calm discussion, felt unusually tight and restless as the king, queen, chief priest, the crown prince, and selected nobles gathered around the long wooden table. Outside, guards continued the search, running across every pathway and corridor with torches and lanterns. Whispers of fear drifted through the palace like smoke. The maid was still missing, and every passing second stretched the tension tighter. The chief priest placed the ancient scroll in the center of the table. The crown prince had not let go of her silver pendant since he found it. He turned it over and over in his hand, his jaw clenched, eyes burning with determination. What else did that decree say? The prince demanded. The chief priest slowly unrolled the scroll. The decree also speaks of an old rivalry, one buried many generations ago. It says that when a royal heir chooses outside the noble lineage, the hidden watchers awaken. The queen frowned. Hidden watchers. The priest nodded. A group who believed the throne should always remain tied to noble lines. They once fought to control royal marriages. They faded into history, but perhaps their followers survived underground. The king's expression darkened. Are you saying someone resurrected them? For what purpose? To force the prince to choose a noble bride, the priest replied. And if he refuses, the decree warns that the watchers will take drastic action. The prince slammed his fist on the table. They already have, they took her. The room fell silent. The king leaned back, the weight of leadership visible in his tired eyes. We need proof. We cannot accuse our nobles based on ancient writings. The prince shot him a fierce look. Father, she is missing, and you are worried about accusation. She is a maid, one of the nobles murmured under his breath, perhaps too softly for his own good. The prince turned sharply. Say that again. The noble looked down instantly, his voice trembling. Nothing, your highness. The prince stepped toward him, but the queen gently held his arm. My son, anger will not help her. He exhaled shakily and stepped back, gripping the pendant tighter. Just then a guard rushed into the room, breathing heavily. "Your Majesties, your Highness, there is something you must see." They followed him quickly to the back of the palace near the old storage huts where unused items were kept. The guard pointed at the ground. A faint trail of footprints, smaller than average, led from the palace corridor through the backyard and disappeared into the forest path. The prince bent down, his fingers brushing the dirt. "These are hers, I know her steps." "But if she walked on her own," the queen whispered, "why did she vanish from the hall?" The priest stared at the footprints with a heavy expression. "Because whoever took her used magic to transport her out of the hall, then forced her to walk from here." The prince's eyes widened. "Forced how?" The priest knelt and touched the soil with 2 fingers. "There are 2 kinds of marks here, her footprints and this." He pointed to a strange indentation, round, uneven, like something heavy dragged slightly. "What is that?" the king asked. The priest didn't answer immediately. His voice, when it came, was grave. "A mark of binding. Only someone trained in forbidden rituals would use such a spell." A noblewoman gasped. "Forbidden rituals in the palace." Another guard ran forward again, this time carrying something carefully wrapped. "We found this near the forest edge." He unwrapped a torn piece of cloth, deep purple again, but with embroidery this time. The prince recognized it instantly. "From the same noble family," he whispered. The king's face hardened. "Bring the noble families to the great hall, all of them." The guards sprinted off. The prince rose to his feet. "I will find her, even if I must search every corner of this kingdom myself." The king stepped in front of him. "And if this is a trap? If someone is trying to lure you out?" The prince didn't hesitate. "Then they will regret it." The queen held his arm again, tears forming. "My son, you are putting yourself in danger. The throne needs you." He looked into her eyes. "She needs me." The priest cleared his throat. "There may be another path, one that does not require chasing shadows blindly." Everyone turned to him. "What path?" the prince asked. The priest pulled a small leather pouch from his robe. In the old stories, when someone vanished under a binding spell, the seer could track the captive's spirit energy using an anchor item they held dear. The prince's heart raced. "Her pendant." "Exactly." The priest took the pendant gently, placed it in the pouch, and tied it closed. He began chanting softly, ancient words humming like distant thunder. Suddenly, the pouch twitched. The prince stepped back slightly. The pouch twitched again, then glowed faintly. Everyone watched in silent shock. The priest stopped chanting and opened the pouch. The pendant rose slightly in the air, barely an inch, but pointed itself toward the forest path. "It's tracking her," the prince whispered, barely breathing. The priest nodded. "She is alive." A relieved gasp passed through the queen. The king exhaled. The prince almost dropped to his knees in gratitude. But the priest's next words chilled the room. "She is alive but not safe." The prince's heart tightened. "Where is she being taken?" The priest swallowed hard. "Toward the ancient caves of Ojamaru." The room erupted in gasps. "No one goes there," a noblewoman cried. "Those caves are cursed," another added. The king shook his head. "The Watchers used to hold their rituals there long before our time." The prince's voice came out low and firm. "Then that is where I'm going." "Your Highness," the queen tried to protest. He stepped forward. "Mother, I love her, and I will not let her suffer while I stand here doing nothing." The priest looked at him with a mix of fear and respect. "If you go, you must be prepared. The Watchers will not give her up easily, and they may try to use her life to bend your will." The prince clenched his teeth. "Let them try." He turned toward the forest path. The pendant glowed brighter. Before he could take a single step, a loud horn blasted through the palace grounds. The king froze. That horn, it signals a royal threat. The prince turned sharply. A guard sprinted across the courtyard. "Your Majesties, the noble families, they are refusing to gather. They have barricaded their quarters and are demanding the prince renounce the maid before they comply." The prince's blood ran cold. The king's face twisted in anger. They dare defy the crown. The guard nodded nervously. "They say they will not surrender any evidence unless the prince agrees to marry from among them." The queen covered her mouth. This has gone too far. And at that moment, another guard appeared behind the first one, trembling and pale. "Your Majesties, there is something else." The king barked, "Speak." The guard bowed his head and whispered, "We found a message carved into the back wall of the maid's sleeping quarters." The prince's breath caught. "A message?" he asked. The guard nodded. "Yes, Your Highness, it says." He swallowed. "If the prince refuses to obey, he will never see her again." The courtyard fell into complete silence. The prince's entire world went still. His pulse hammered. His grip on the pendant tightened until his knuckles whitened. The king took a slow step forward. "My son, what will you do now?" The prince lifted his head slowly, his expression turning stone cold and fierce. "I will save her, and whoever wrote that message will answer to me." The wind howled across the palace walls. Shadows deepened, and from somewhere beyond the trees, the ancient caves seemed to call. The moon hung low over the forest, casting long shadows that moved with the wind. The crown prince of Aderin rode at the front of a small troop of palace guards, their torches flickering as they followed the narrow trail leading toward the forbidden caves of Ojamaru. The night was eerily quiet, too quiet for comfort. Even the crickets and night birds seemed to have vanished. The priest's tracking charm glowed dimly in the prince's hand, pulling him forward like a compass guided by fate. "Your Highness," one guard whispered nervously, "they say no one who enters these woods after midnight returns alive." The prince didn't answer. His eyes were fixed ahead, jaw set, his heart pounding not with fear, but fury and love. Somewhere beyond those trees was the woman who had stolen his heart. The woman who cleaned the palace floors barefoot, who sang softly while arranging flowers, who laughed shyly when he first spoke to her. And now she was gone, snatched away because of her humble birth. The thought burned inside him. He wouldn't rest until she was back in his arms. Behind him, the chief priest rode silently on a donkey, whispering prayers under his breath. "The spirits are restless tonight," he murmured. "The air carries an old hatred." The prince looked back. "What kind of hatred?" "The kind that never died," the priest said gravely. "The Watchers never truly vanished, my prince. They hid, waiting for a reason to rise again, and you gave them one." The forest thickened. Mist crept between the trees, swirling around their feet. The torches flickered and dimmed. "Keep your eyes open," the prince warned. Suddenly one of the guards gasped, "My lord, look." Up ahead the pendant glowed brighter, illuminating faint footprints on the ground. Bare feet, small, light. The prince's breath caught. She was here. But then he noticed something else, larger prints alongside hers, heavy boots. And smeared beside them, a faint streak of blood. "Someone dragged her," the prince whispered, fury rising in his throat. He quickened his pace. Minutes later, they reached the entrance of the Ojamaru caves, a yawning black mouth surrounded by strange carvings. The chief priest dismounted, holding up his staff. These markings, their ancient sigils, they ward off the pure-hearted. The prince frowned. "Then how do we get in?" The priest hesitated. "You are of royal blood and your cause is love. That may grant you passage. But once inside, you must not touch anything sacred, or you risk awakening what sleeps here." The prince nodded once, understood. He stepped forward. As he crossed the threshold, the air grew colder. His torch flickered wildly, then steadied again. The walls glistened with damp moss, and the sound of dripping water echoed in the dark. The guards followed carefully, weapons drawn. The deeper they went, the heavier the silence became, like the air itself was watching. Suddenly, a voice echoed softly ahead. A woman's voice. Faint, trembling. "Please let me go." The prince froze, his heart leapt. "That's her." He ran forward, ignoring the priest's warning calls. Around the bend, the tunnel opened into a vast underground chamber. At its center stood a stone altar, glowing faintly with blue light, and tied beside it, her wrists bound, was the palace maid. She was weak, her face pale, her hair messy, her eyes half open. "Your Highness," she whispered, "you came." The prince rushed forward, but before he could reach her, a shadow moved between them. A figure stepped into the light, tall, cloaked, with a golden mask covering the face. The prince stopped dead. "Who are you?" he demanded. The masked figure chuckled softly. "You have courage, Prince of Aderin, but courage is foolishness when love blinds wisdom." "Where is she?" "She is here," the figure said, circling the altar slowly. "Untouched for now, but if you take another step, I will let the curse finish what it started." The prince clenched his fists. "What curse?" The figure raised a hand. "The curse placed upon your bloodline generations ago, a warning ignored by kings and queens. Do you not know your history?" The chief priest entered behind him, panting. "You speak lies, Dark One. The Watchers were destroyed." The masked figure turned. "Were we? We lived in the shadows while your kings feasted on luxury. We watched as the royal family defied the old ways, but now the time for silence is over." He faced the prince again. "You were supposed to choose a noble bride, a union that would preserve the power of the throne. Instead, you chose a maid, a girl of no lineage, no power. Do you think love alone can guard a kingdom?" The prince's eyes blazed. "If love cannot guard it, then the throne is not worth keeping." The figure's tone hardened. "Then you are not worthy of it." He raised his hand, and the maid screamed as faint black smoke began to coil around her body. "Stop," the prince shouted, stepping forward. "Take me instead." The figure tilted his head. "Would you trade your crown for her life?" "Yes," the prince yelled, "gladly." The queen's voice suddenly echoed from the tunnel entrance. "My son, no." Everyone turned. The king and queen had arrived with reinforcements. The queen's robes dragged across the damp floor, her eyes wide with fear. "My son," she pleaded, "you cannot give up your birthright for a servant girl." The maid sobbed softly, shaking her head. "Your Highness, don't, please." The prince looked from his mother to the girl. His voice trembled. "She is not just a servant, mother. She is the only one who ever saw me as a man, not a title." The king stepped forward. "Son, think of the kingdom." The masked figure laughed bitterly. "You see, even your parents would trade her life for power." The prince took a deep breath. "Then I will prove them wrong." He drew his sword. The figure spread his arms. "You would fight the unseen." "If it means freeing her, yes." A gust of cold wind swept through the chamber. The torches went out again, leaving only the eerie blue glow of the altar. The priest began chanting, his voice steady. "By the light of truth, reveal your form." The masked figure screamed as smoke swirled around him. His cloak fluttered wildly, and suddenly the golden mask cracked apart. Behind it was a face half human, half shadow. The queen gasped, "Spirits preserve us." The creature hissed, "You dare summon light in my realm." The priest slammed his staff against the ground, and a burst of white flame exploded, momentarily blinding everyone. When the light faded, the creature was gone, leaving only the maid unconscious on the ground. The prince ran to her side, untied her wrists, and lifted her gently into his arms. "She's breathing," he whispered in relief. The queen knelt beside them, tears streaming down her face. "Oh, my child, I was wrong. Your heart is pure." The king exhaled slowly. "Perhaps, Love is the noblest blood of all. The priest nodded gravely. But beware, the watchers are not gone. That was only one of them. They will return. The prince looked at the sleeping girl in his arms and said quietly, "Let them come. As long as she's with me, I will face whatever darkness remains." He carried her out of the cave as dawn began to break through the forest trees. The birds began to sing again, the mist lifted. But behind them, deep inside the cave, faint whispers echoed, soft and sinister. And on the cold stone floor where the creature had vanished, the golden mask reformed itself, piece by piece. A single whisper lingered in the air. "The throne will never bless a servant." The prince stopped for a moment, sensing it, then tightened his grip on her and kept walking toward the light. The palace erupted with noise the moment the prince returned, carrying the unconscious maid in his arms. Servants gasped and stepped aside. Guards bowed their heads. Even the nobles, those who had mocked her, dismissed her, or secretly wished her harm, stood frozen with unease. The king ordered the royal physician immediately. The queen followed close behind, her face carved with guilt. The chief priest remained silent, gripping his staff as if expecting another attack at any moment. The prince laid her gently on a velvet-covered couch in the royal healing chamber. Her breathing was shallow but steady. The physician, an elderly woman with years of experience, examined her with slow, careful hands. After several tense minutes, she finally spoke. "She is exhausted, frightened, and drained by dark magic, but her spirit is strong. She will wake." Relief washed over the prince. His muscles relaxed as if held together by hope alone. The queen placed a trembling hand on his shoulder. "My son, I owe you an apology." The prince looked at her, surprised. She continued softly, "I thought I was protecting the kingdom. I thought choosing a noble bride would strengthen the throne. But I forgot that a kingdom without love, without truth, stands on weak pillars." The king nodded, stepping forward. "You showed courage we did not expect. You chose love when many choose power." The prince swallowed. "I would go to the ends of the earth for her." The queen smiled sadly. "And I finally understand that she is not a weakness." She looked toward the sleeping girl. "She may be the very strength the kingdom needs." But not everyone agreed. A group of nobles suddenly gathered at the doorway. The prince turned sharply. Their spokesman bowed stiffly but did not lower his proud expression. "Your Majesties, Your Highness," he began, "we wish the girl well, but we must address a grave issue. The Watchers, if truly awakened, pose a danger to this throne, and the cause of their awakening lies with the prince's choice." The prince's jaw tightened. "You dare blame her?" The noble met his eyes boldly. "Not her, but the decision to marry outside noble lines. We fear it will bring chaos to Aderin kingdom. Today a spirit attacked. Tomorrow, who knows?" The queen stepped forward. "Are you questioning the authority of the royal family?" He bowed again, but his voice remained steady. "We are questioning the danger of breaking traditions that protected this kingdom for generations." The prince clenched his fists. "You stand here speaking of tradition while a woman's life was nearly taken." Another noblewoman added, "And we stand here reminding you, Your Highness, that we too have daughters, raised to be queens, educated in diplomacy, trained to support the throne. Will all those sacrifices be ignored for a palace maid?" The prince's voice lowered dangerously. "I choose her." "And we choose stability," the spokesman replied. A tense silence filled the chamber. The chief priest broke it. The Watchers attacked from the shadows. They manipulated fear, tradition, and jealousy. If you turn against each other now, the kingdom will crumble by their design. The nobles exchanged uneasy looks. The priest continued, "I searched the ancient writings. The Watchers gain power not from magic alone, but from division. As royal unity weakens, their influence grows." The prince frowned. "So because I chose love, they saw an opportunity." The priest nodded. And if this division continues, they will strike again, stronger. The king gestured sharply. Enough. This is not a time for arguments. Until the maid wakes, no decision about marriage or tradition will be addressed. The nobles bowed reluctantly and left. When they were gone, the queen sat beside the sleeping girl, brushing hair gently from her forehead. She risked her life because of our conflict. If the Watchers attack again, we cannot let her face it alone. The prince lowered himself into a nearby chair, exhaustion settling into his bones. She shouldn't have to face anything ever again. The priest watched him closely, but she might have too. The prince looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" he asked. The priest hesitated. "There is a final part of the decree, one I did not read earlier. It says the chosen bride of the crown prince, if of humble birth, will be tested, not by spirits alone, but by the kingdom itself." The prince's chest tightened. "Tested," he repeated. "The Watchers will stir unrest among the nobles," the priest explained. "They will plant fear, ignite rivalries, and manipulate traditions. If the kingdom rejects her, the Watchers gain victory. If the kingdom accepts her, their influence dies." The prince exhaled shakily. "So they want to force her out?" "Yes," the priest said, "and they will not stop." The prince stood abruptly. "I will protect her. I will protect this kingdom, and I will end the Watchers for good." But before the priest could respond, a soft voice whispered, "Your Highness." The prince spun around. She was awake. Her eyes fluttered open, filled with confusion and fear. She tried to sit up, but the queen gently held her down. "You're safe, dear," the queen whispered softly. "Rest, you've endured enough." Her gaze shifted weakly until she found the prince. He stepped closer, his voice breaking. "You're safe now, I'm here." Tears slipped from her eyes. I thought I'd never see you again." He knelt beside her, taking her trembling hand. "You will always see me, I promise." She shook her head weakly. "They said you would give me up. They said you would choose a noble maiden over me." The queen gasped in shame. The prince lifted her hand to his lips. "Never. I crossed darkness to find you. Nothing will tear us apart." Her tears flowed freely. "They will try again, I heard them. They said the kingdom will burn before accepting me." The priest stepped forward, concern deep in his eyes. "What else did you hear, child? Anything can help us stop them." She closed her eyes, trying to remember. Voices, whispers, they said, "The throne will rise against itself. The prince's love will be the first sacrifice." The queen clutched her chest. The king's eyes narrowed. "They mean to destroy the royal family from within." The prince stood, fury roaring through him. "Then they will fail." But just as the tension reached its height, another guard burst into the chamber, pale and panting. "Your Majesties, your Highness, another message has appeared." The prince stiffened. "Where?" The guard swallowed hard. "On the palace gates." Everyone stared. "What does it say?" the king demanded. The guard's voice shook. "It says, tonight the kingdom chooses the next queen. If the prince chooses wrong, dawn will rise on a fallen throne." Silence slammed into the room. The queen whispered, "A decision tonight." The maid's breath hitched in fear. And the prince's heart racing. Jaw set, realized the Watchers were preparing for their boldest attack yet. A test not of magic, but of loyalty, power, love, and the kingdom itself. Night fell hard over the Kingdom of Aderin. Not softly, not gradually, hard, like a curtain of darkness dragged across the sky. The drums stopped. The wind stilled. Even the torches along the palace walls burned with a strange stiffness, their flames barely flickering. Something in the air felt wrong. Watchful. Waiting. The message carved into the palace gates had already spread across the kingdom like wildfire. Tonight, the kingdom chooses the next queen. If the prince chooses wrong, dawn will rise on a fallen throne. People gathered outside the palace walls in murmuring clusters, fearful, excited, judgmental, no one sure what fate the night held. Inside the palace, tension thickened every corridor. The prince stood in his ceremonial robe, staring out the window at the crowd below. The maid sat on a nearby couch, still recovering, her fingers clasping the edge of her dress nervously. Her eyes, still tired from the ordeal in the cave, kept drifting toward him, full of worry. "Your Highness," she whispered softly, "you don't have to choose me. I don't want anything to happen to you or the kingdom because of me." He turned sharply, crossing the room in 2 strides. He knelt before her, just as he had earlier, taking her shaking hands in his. "You listen to me," he said quietly but firmly. "I will not let fear dictate my life. I will not let the Watchers or anyone decide whom I am allowed to love." Her eyes filled with tears again. "But the nobles, your people, they said terrible things." The prince's jaw tightened, "and they will answer for every word." The queen entered then, her eyes red from hours of worry. "My son," she approached slowly, "the nobles are preparing for an assembly tonight. They insist the traditional marriage parade must be done one final time. They want all noble maidens lined up again, dressed and ready for you to choose." He stood. "I've chosen already." The queen swallowed. "I know that, but they believe if the ancient tradition is broken, the Watchers will rise in full force." The maid lowered her gaze. The prince turned to his mother. "And what do you believe?" The queen sighed heavily. "I believe love shouldn't be this dangerous. I believe a mother's heart is breaking because her child is being forced between the future of the throne and the future of his happiness." She reached out and held his hand. "And I believe," she added quietly, "that the kingdom will either rise or fall tonight, depending on what you decide." The prince took a deep breath, then retreated to his chamber to prepare. The royal assembly. The throne hall had never been so full. Nobles stood packed beneath the towering pillars. Their daughters, ornamented in gold, beads, carefully braided hairstyles, stood proudly at the center, each one glowing under the torchlight. Musicians sat stiffly by their drums, unsure whether to play. The chief priest stood near the throne, gripping the scroll like a shield. The king watched from his seat, face carved from stone. When the prince entered, the hall fell silent. He walked slowly, each step echoing like thunder across the tiles. Though dressed in royal robes, his expression was that of a man walking into battle. Whispers rippled through the hall. "He must choose tonight. He cannot bring a maid to the throne. The Watchers are real, we heard the screams. What if he chooses her? Will the kingdom burn?" The noble maidens formed a line, bowing gracefully in unison. The prince didn't look at them. He looked at the maid, standing near the queen, her dress plain, her gaze lowered, trembling. The king rose. "My son, tonight, by tradition, you must present your choice before the kingdom." "I have my choice," the prince said steadily. The nobles tensed. One noblewoman stepped forward. "Your Highness, if you choose wrongly, our families will withdraw support from the throne. We cannot allow a servant girl to become queen." "Then you stand against the crown?" the prince asked. She swallowed. We stand for tradition." The chief priest raised his staff. "Let the decree speak once more." He unrolled the ancient scroll. "The kingdom shall find peace only when the heir's choice comes from truth of heart. If that choice is rejected by the people, the Watchers will rise and claim the throne." Gasps filled the room. The prince's eyes widened. "Rejected by the people." The priest nodded. "Yes, if the kingdom refuses your choice, the Watchers gain power." The nobles exchanged frightened glances. The prince stepped forward. "Then hear my choice." The hall braced itself. He walked past the noble maidens, past the nobles, past the council, past even his father, until he stood directly before the maid. Her breath hitched. Her knees almost buckled. His eyes softened. He lifted her trembling hand. "This," he said loudly, "is the woman I choose. She is the one I love. She is the one I will marry. Let the entire kingdom hear it." The hall exploded. Some cried out in anger. Some cried in joy. Some begged him to reconsider. Some shouted in disbelief. The maid nearly collapsed. The queen caught her gently. The nobles surged forward, voices raised. "You defy tradition. You endanger the throne. We refuse this choice. A servant cannot be queen." Then, boom! A blast of cold air tore through the hall. Torches flickered. Voices died instantly. The chief priest dropped the scroll. From the shadows along the walls, faint silhouettes appeared, shifting, flickering, half visible. Darkness gathered behind the pillars like smoke. The nobles screamed. The queen grabbed the maid. The king grabbed his staff. The prince drew his sword. The watchers had come. A voice, cold, hollow, ancient, echoed through the hall. "The kingdom rejects the girl. The throne rejects the girl. She must not sit on the crown. The throne will fall before she rises." The prince stepped forward, sword raised. "I will protect her with my life." The shadows hissed. "Then you, prince, will be the first to fall." The hall plunged into darkness. Screams erupted. Guards rushed blindly. The maid cried out as cold hands wrapped around her, pulling her backward. The prince swung in the darkness. The king shouted for light. The queen screamed her son's name. And just before the torches reignited, a final chilling voice whispered through the gloom. "At dawn the kingdom dies." Darkness swallowed the throne hall completely. The torches extinguished one by one until the palace found itself drowned in a heavy, suffocating void. Screams ricocheted off the marble walls. Guards collided with pillars. Noble maidens clung to their mothers. The ground trembled beneath their feet as if something ancient and furious had awakened beneath the palace. The watchers had returned. Their voices whispered everywhere and nowhere. "At dawn the kingdom dies. Love has poisoned the throne. She must not rise." The prince swung his sword through the darkness, calling out desperately, "Where is she? Let her go." But the shadows laughed, cold, mocking, merciless. The queen clutched the maid's hand, refusing to release her even as icy tendrils tried to drag her away. The king slammed his staff against the floor repeatedly, shouting commands to guards who could no longer see. Then, boom! A burst of pale blue fire ripped through the hall. The chief priest had struck the floor with his staff, unleashing a wave of light that shoved the shadows backward and illuminated the room again, dimly, but enough to see shapes. And what they saw made hearts stop. The watchers did not have bodies. They were silhouettes, faded forms, mouths wide and screaming though no breath came from them. Some hovered, some crawled, and all of them surrounded the prince's chosen bride. The maid trembled violently as a tall shadow rose behind her, its form stretching to the ceiling, its eyes like two burning cracks in the dark. The chief priest shouted over the roaring wind, "Prince, there is only one way to defeat them." The prince ran toward the maid, sword still raised. "Tell me." "The decree says," the priest yelled, "that the only force stronger than the Watchers is the unified acceptance of the kingdom." The prince froze. "What does that mean?" "It means," the queen shouted desperately, "the people must stand with you, all of them, from nobles to servants, from elders to children. The Watchers feed on rejection. If the people accept her, they die." The prince turned to the terrified nobles. "Then accept her," he shouted, "for the kingdom's sake." But fear ruled the hall. What if this curse destroys us? What if tradition is broken forever? What if she is the downfall written in prophecy? Their panic gave the watchers strength. The shadows grew larger. The icy wind howled louder. The maid cried out in pain as darkness curled around her arms. The prince took a deep breath and stepped directly between her and the shadows. "If any of you still doubt my choice," he declared, voice steady and fierce, "then look at me now. Look at what I am willing to sacrifice." He dropped his sword. Gasps filled the hall. He placed his palms on the frozen floor, kneeling in surrender. "If rejecting tradition means saving her, then I will throw away my crown. I will give up the throne, the title, everything." The queen gasped, "My son, no." The maid sobbed, "Your Highness, please don't." But he lifted his chin. "I choose her over the throne, over power, over fear, over tradition. If the kingdom must fall, then let it fall because of love, not hatred." The shadows paused. The hall fell still. For the first time, the watchers hesitated. The king stepped forward, eyes filled with pride and sorrow. "If the kingdom must rise again, let it rise on love, not fear." He placed his hand on the prince's shoulder. The queen moved beside them. "I accept her. From this moment forward, she is my daughter." The maid gasped, tears dripping from her eyes. The nobles wavered. Their fear battled with their pride, their tradition with their humanity. Then a small voice echoed from the back of the hall. "I accept her," whispered a young stable boy, stepping forward trembling. "She was always kind to me." A servant woman followed. "I accept her too." Then another. And another. "I accept her. She belongs here. She will be a good queen. We choose love with the prince." One by one, like sparks jumping from coal, the hall began to shift. Nobles lowered their heads. A maiden stepped forward and bowed. "Your Highness, forgive us. We accept your bride." Her father bowed next. "We accept her." Soon, the entire hall echoed with one unified voice. "We accept her." The watchers shrieked. The shadows spasmed, shrinking violently as if the acceptance scorched them. The tall shadow behind the maid writhed and thrashed, its form breaking apart like ash caught in a hurricane. The chief priest raised his staff. "By the unity of this kingdom, begone!" A blazing white wave burst through the hall. The watchers screamed, high, piercing, ancient, as they dissolved into nothingness, vanishing like smoke in sunlight. Silence hid. A warm, golden glow seeped into the hall as dawn broke outside. They were safe. The maid fell to her knees, overwhelmed. The prince dropped beside her, pulling her into a tight embrace. She sobbed into his chest, clutching him as if afraid he might disappear too. The queen knelt beside them, placing her hands on their shoulders. "You are one of us now." The king announced loudly, voice echoing with authority. "Let it be known across all lands. Love has won. The watchers are defeated. And the prince shall marry the woman he has chosen." Cheers erupted, relief pouring through the hall like rain after drought. The prince stood, helping her up. He wiped her tears gently. "You fought harder than any queen before you." She smiled tremblingly. "I only fought because you believed in me." The chief priest stepped forward. "The throne is safe because the people united. That is the true power of a kingdom." And so, with the danger gone, preparations began immediately. The royal wedding. The kingdom lit up with celebration. The maid was dressed in the finest ceremonial attire, her once trembling hands now confident in the prince's grasp. Every noble, every servant, every citizen gathered to witness the union. As the prince placed the crown gently on her head, the people cheered. "Long live the queen!" Tears filled her eyes. Love had prevailed. Tradition had bent, not broken. And the kingdom rose stronger than ever. The prince kissed her hand. "No shadow will ever touch you again." She smiled, "Not while you're by my side." The king and queen beamed with pride. The chief priest declared, "Let this day remind us all that true royalty is measured not by birth, but by the courage to love." And with that, the crown prince and the once humble palace maid began their new life together, bringing peace, unity, and hope to Aderin kingdom. A love powerful enough to defeat ancient shadows, heal generations, and rewrite the traditions of an entire land.